So if you are like most people I know, you typically tend to struggle with cravings now and again, or maybe even a lot of the times. And this is so frustrating for a lot of people because it often leads you to stray off the path of your goal for losing weight or maintaining a healthy body or whatever it might be. So I thought today I'd talk about cravings and where they come from, what they are, and how we can actually manage them. And hopefully this will help you to still be able to enjoy the foods that you love within moderation and also still stick to your plan and reach your goals that you have set out for yourself. So before we start with the video, just a quick introduction. My name is Melissa Null. I'm a registered dietitian and I'm part of the Body 20 Nutrition Doctor team. If you are new here, very welcome. We do these videos every 2 weeks and you are very welcome to send us any questions if you have via WhatsApp or email. And you're also welcome to send us any topics if there are any specific topics you'd like us to chat about in these videos. So back to the video. Cravings. First of all, let's just talk about what they are before we talk about where they come from. So cravings are actually quite interesting. Cravings are typically a heightened eating motivation for a specific food that we experience in the brain. If we compare that to hunger, we see that hunger is a non-specific motivation for calorie-containing foods. So there is definitely a difference, and we see that they do follow a different brain circuit in the brain to specific, situations or cues. So now we know that cravings are a specific eating or heightened eating motivation for certain foods. But why does that happen? So we do see, or where does this motivation come from? So we do see that this motivation actually comes from our ancestors already. Actually, when we look at the brain, we know that the brain is hardwired to reach certain key goals that supports survival and reproduction, from ancestral times, but it's also been carried through up until now. I mean, the main focus of the body is to survive and to reproduce, of course. So as soon as the brain sees that a certain goal in terms of whether it is getting food, whether it's getting water, whether it's getting social support or physical comfort or whatever it might be, as soon as one of those goals are being achieved, the brain responds by releasing dopamine. So dopamine is a very popular neurochemical that we see in the brain, and the reason that it's been studied so much and that you get to probably see it a lot in videos or in research or whatever it might be is because it has such a powerful impact on the body and the brain and how we feel. So dopamine is typically related or associated with feeling happy and excited and feeling good and motivated, of course. So you can see that as soon as the brain sees, oh, we've reached a goal, it responds by rewarding the body with a surge of dopamine. Okay, so now often what we see is as soon as you maybe feel down or you feel hungry or whatever and you eat something, you get that surge of dopamine and you feel better. And then what happens is this brain kind of remembers, I felt better after I ate a certain thing or I did a certain thing because there was a release of dopamine, and it almost kind of carries on by reinforcing that behavior every time we see that, decrease in motivation or if that goal is not being achieved. So that is basically where these cravings come from. So it's actually a very natural response. So I don't want you to beat yourself up, but there are certain things that we can do to try and reduce the amount of, let's call it, bad foods that we eat in response to trying to get that dopamine hit. All right, so just another point that I want to talk about in terms of the dopamine surges, we do see with research that foods that contain high carbohydrate content and sugar, as well as fats, tend to lead to a higher surge in dopamine. And this also just comes back to our, days in history where food wasn't as readily available as it is now, and we had to survive. And as soon as you get something that's high in carbohydrates and fats, we typically see that is going to sustain the body a lot better. So that is a better response. It's a better goal that has been achieved. So you get a bigger surge in dopamine. Unfortunately, we don't live in those, fortunately and unfortunately, we don't live in those times anymore. So we do have access to food readily, but unfortunately, we're still getting that intense dopamine surge when you have that slice of pizza or you eat that chocolate, for example, because the body is kind of rewarding you for getting a really good source of carbohydrates and fats that it actually is seeing as survival, for example. So now that we understand that cravings actually is a brain, the brain trying to get us to reach certain goals, we can try and manage them in our day-to-day lives. So the very first thing that I always recommend when it comes to if you do tend to crave certain things is, firstly, we need to assess why you need to constantly get a dopamine surge. What is lacking otherwise that you are replacing with foods, or with certain food items in your diet to get that feeling of, feeling better or having that dopamine hit almost. And that's really important to assess. Think about your relationships, think about your hobbies, think about your work, and those types of things. Really just try and be mindful of whether there are certain areas, except for food, that you can address that's going to make you feel better. Maybe getting a bit, like cleaning up your environment, or just working on your relationships, or whatever it might be, or improving your sleep, and those types of things. So it really is a holistic approach. We don't just want to focus on the food, because it can often become really hard if you are trying to just put a plaster on it. So really trying to fix the root cause is super important. But little things that you can do to, try and limit the amount of unhealthier foods that you consume to get that dopamine surge is to try and not have it present or available as much as possible. So try not to have or surround yourself or put yourself in situations where you're going to have to say no or be tempted by those, certain foods. Try not to have too many sweets or unhealthy treats and so forth available at home, where you almost have to force yourself to go out and get it, and hopefully you'll think twice about it. The other thing that I also do recommend is to try and have a really well-balanced and healthy, nutritious foundation when it comes to your diet. Having a good quality breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and having some good quality snacks in between, to try and also make sure that you aren't fulfilling the hunger cues with the unhealthier foods as well, which will just lead to a decrease, or almost like a downward spiral at the end of the day. So those are really important things you can do. Another thing is, I always say that if you do have a craving and you've tried to address it, you've thought about everything else to do, but you still really want that block of chocolate or whatever it might be, or that ice cream, go out, get the ice cream, but try not to overindulge on it. Really, not having just one piece or whatever, but having a smaller amount, but pairing it with other types of foods that will also just make you feel a bit fuller for longer, will probably help you to prevent that intense sugar high and crash. So thinking about, let's say you're going out for a chocolate bar, you feel like having a chocolate bar, okay, cool, you get your chocolate bar, but then try and pair it with a few nuts, maybe a fruit that's high in fiber and that type of thing, just to make sure that you also limit the portion size, but you're pairing it with foods that's going to make you feel a bit fuller for longer and satisfied over the long period of time. Because and I really don't recommend going, let's say you want to have a chocolate bar, I don't recommend going for a sugar-free chocolate bar or something that's like not really something you want. Go for the food that you want, but try and pair it with a few healthier options with it to make it more sustainable and more filling at the end of the day. So I hope this has been helpful. Let me know if you have any questions, and like I said, you're welcome to send us any recommendations for any videos that's upcoming. And then I hope you all have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.